You know, the more and more that I learn about the economy and the way things work and the way people make money, the more and more I realize that the entire system, the entire way that money works, is all built on a foundation of reckless emotion. Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers, and today I'm going to try to break down the various emotions and depression in the housing market. And I thought it would be time for me to finally talk in more detail about what I went through during the foreclosure that I had in my life. My foreclosure also led to bankruptcy and repossession, and I thought it would be really important to start talking about this, especially considering the market that we're in right now is incredibly emotional in the face of overwhelming overvaluation and overwhelming unaffordability. I'm going to stick to talking about homeowners. I want to talk about homeowners that are locked in because of low interest rates, and I want to talk about homeowners that are locked in because they have no equity or declining equity. There's a great deal of difference in both of those situations. I'm also going to talk about potential future home buyers that are on the sideline, whether they're priced out on the sideline or rather they're sitting on the sideline essentially waiting out the housing market and waiting for houses to be more affordable. The homeowners that are locked in because of their low interest rates are in a much better situation than anybody else, because normally they're going to have a mortgage rate that's about $1,000 less a month on average, and a lot of them are going to have potentially over $100,000 in equity. So it's a completely different situation if you're a homeowner that's locked in because of low rates. Now, unfortunately, for some of those homeowners that are locked in, some of those homeowners with that equity will be forced to sell because of normal things that happen in everyday life, like divorce, medical emergency, and the number one thing, job relocation. Where it gets a little emotional for these homeowners is what to do if they sold their property. Now, obviously, a lot of people would be happy to cash in on their equity, maybe pocket $100,000, $150,000, pay off all of their debt, and have a nice little cushion to get through this recession. But many of these people are asking themselves, where would I live once I sold? Because when people sell, obviously, if it's their primary residence, they have to purchase another place to live. And they're starting to understand that if they did sell their house, they would either have to buy a house that would require a pretty large down payment and eat into their profit, and their mortgage payment would potentially go up about $1,000 on average. So the reality is some home sellers can't afford to even sell their property and cash in. Now, granted, some of them can rent and wait out the housing market, but overall, we do know that there are a lot of homeowners on the sidelines that would normally sell that are not selling because they don't want to sacrifice that low interest rate. This whole feeling of wealth, meaning that Americans have a sense of wealth because they have home ownership and they have equity, they can't even tap into that. So the reality is, you know, do they really have equity? You know, are people really sitting on that much equity? Another thing some of these homeowners are learning is the amount of fees it costs to actually sell your house. And roughly, you guys know, obviously that varies. There are some realtors that will negotiate their commission, even though every realtor is legally required to. But generally, the cost to sell about 8%. I would say on average 6% in total realtor fees, about 2% in closing costs. But the reality is at least they're sitting on super low interest rates, and at least they have a whole bunch of equity. So they have that going for them. But now let me talk to you guys about the homeowners that are locked into their house because they're upside down in equity, or they've had negative equity decline and they essentially can't sell. Now, this specific topic really hits home because I was one of those people back in 2008 and 2009. And I want to tell you guys, the amount of depression that came with losing my house was something that I really can't put into words. And you guys, one of the biggest issues for me is going through that process, I lost a lot of hope. And because I lost a lot of hope as a homeowner, when I had my foreclosure, I actually struggled for 9 years. When the reality is when I personally had my foreclosure, my bankruptcy, my repo, if I wouldn't have given up hope, I would have probably been able to rebound in about 4 years. But again, I gave up hope. I thought I was worthless. I didn't think I was a man. It was very, very discouraging. And so I see something similar happening right now, not to the extent it was happening during my era, but it's essentially happening to anyone that's purchasing a home right now. So most of the new homeowners right now, about 2022 and on, most all of those homeowners, you guys, are sitting upside down in their house. Now, the amount of depression, the amount of anxiety that comes with that is overwhelming. And we see that in these buyer's remorse surveys. And essentially, if you guys really think about it, here's what people are doing right now. If someone's on the sideline renting and they go to purchase a house, maybe they feel like they have to, maybe they feel like they want to be a part of the social norm, maybe they're being pressured from their spouse, maybe they're being pressured from a realtor. But the reality is those 93% of buyers that have buyer's remorse, essentially what they've learned is they've traded in the balance that they had in their life, the peace that they had in their life, whether it was renting or not, and they've traded that in, hunting the social norm, hunting home ownership. So once they finally move into the house and they make their first mortgage payment, the honeymoon phase is over. Basically, they're looking around the house and saying, this is what everyone had the fear of missing out about. So they sit there making their mortgage payment that's probably $1,000, maybe $2,000 more a month than their rent was. So they're spending even more money during inflation, during the front end of a recession. And meanwhile, their savings has been greatly depleted because they needed a down payment for their house. And if we really study these buyer's remorse surveys, half of these people feel like they rushed this process and that they purchased a house that's overvalued and now they're financially struggling. So one of the primary depressions right now for recent homeowners is basically waking up to reality. And remember, you guys, it's not a realtor's job to tell you not to buy. It's a realtor's job to tell you to buy. And we also see that on these buyer's remorse surveys. We see a bunch of people that are not happy with the advice they got from their realtor. Even though I believe that these professionals are liable somewhat for misleading these people, ultimately, it will always go right back to it was the consumer's fault because they signed the dotted line. Going back into my foreclosure, I remember what was going on in my mind. I remember driving on the 5 freeway in Southern California. I was about 24 years old. I was driving in my Cadillac CTSV manual sport car. I was listening to the radio and I remember thinking, wow, there's a lot of people talking about the housing market crash. And then I remember thinking that, you know what? I'm not going to trouble myself with thinking about that. And I'm just going to continue living my life the way that I've been living it since I've been an adult. So, and the reality is, I stopped thinking about what was going on back in 2008. I kept my head in the sand. I wanted to act as if nothing would ever change. And basically, you guys, because I stopped thinking about what was going on, even though it was everywhere, news, radio, it was everywhere, I allowed myself to get blindsided. And as a result of being blindsided, you guys, I lost everything, including my family. There's no way for any of you to know the feeling of being trapped upside down in your house unless you've been there. The feeling of helplessness, the feeling of being trapped, the feeling of making a mistake, it's all I could think about after I lost everything, you guys. And this lasted for years. So I'll say this again. Why are so many people rushing out to trade the life they have right now? Maybe it's balanced, they're saving money, they're happy. Why would they trade all of that in to fit the social norm and purchase a house? Now, it would make sense if our housing market was more balanced, if the fundamentals were there, if everything was sustained. It would make sense, but it's not making sense. And I understand that it is so confusing right now with the housing markets. You got so many people saying so many different things, which is why I really try to push you guys back to the recent homeowners, the people that are purchasing their primary residence, because it's those people that can understand the most about the mistakes that they're making. And again, remember the last buyer's remorse survey, 93%, you guys. Doesn't that tell us something? The way I look at it is the entire market, the entire system is set up to make profit off of our bad decisions and off of our mistakes. And that followed me around, you guys, when I had my foreclosure and my bankruptcy and my repo. That followed me around for 9 years. It was so much harder to live my life because of the fees and the penalties that I had to pay because I had a bankruptcy and foreclosure were overwhelming. It just made life, it made everything so much harder. So now what I want to do is let's go into the emotions for people that are on the sideline, whether they're locked out because of unaffordability or whether they're choosing to hold like myself on the sideline waiting for the market to correct. But let me show you guys where I'm at real quick. I've taken you guys to East End Park. It is hot, it is humid, but it's not as hot and humid. And I plan on finishing the month out, taking you guys to this park. I'm a little bit tired of going into the graphs. I'm gonna stay in the data, I'm gonna stay in the graphs, but I really wanted to get outside and I wanted to talk to you guys and talk about what you're going through and just kind of get away from the data. The beautiful thing is this, we're now past most of the fear of missing out purchasing. Okay, so we've hit the peak. We're on our way down in prices. Inventory should start going up till about October, hopefully longer. And prices on average should start going down from now until at least February. Now, if we have a housing market crash, like I believe so, and my definition of a crash is a loss of equity or value of approximately 15% from peak. Now, if we do have a price crash, probably what that's going to mean is we will have to get past normal seasonal home buying next year in 2024. I'm already convinced that the remaining part of this year, you guys, is going to be in our favor. Black swans will pop their heads out, things will break. I'm not sure what's going to break first, but I know that the home buying in 2023 and that home buying propping up the housing market, that's over, you guys. And now we're gonna start to feel the additional effects of quantitative tightening and high interest rates topped with unsustainability. Now there's some dog barking over there. I don't know if it's gonna attack me if I turn my back or what. You guys, I don't know if you can hear it. Now I wanna talk about the potential home buyers right now that are locked out because of interest rates and unaffordability. And I wanna remind you guys that in real estate, I've probably personally been part of at least 1,000 closed transactions. And you guys, I gotta tell you, 1,000 closed transactions in real estate, that's a lot. But even more than that, I've talked to thousands and thousands of consumers. Dang, those bugs are loud. Holy smokes. I told you Houston has bugs, y'all. Can you hear that? If you can, I'm sorry. It's a little overwhelming. I used to put consumers in something called an action plan. Essentially, if a consumer called me, I would tell them a few tips on what they needed to do to put them in a situation to become a homeowner. And I want to tell you guys, the number one thing that I listed there was hope. Because I understood with a over 20-year career helping thousands of people that as soon as people lose hope, usually their financial life gets much worse and their plans and their goals basically go to the wayside. So hope is the most important thing, whether you currently own or whether you're on the sideline. Never ever give up hope. And if you're on the sidelines priced out right now, I know exactly what you're going through. You probably are extremely discouraged. You're probably telling yourself, when will things change? And things will never change. I'm doomed. I will always have to rent. I'm gonna have to accept home values and prices because this is the new normal. And it's probably causing a ton of people, you guys, to give up hope and to basically continue living their life recklessly, financially recklessly. And what I mean by that, overspending. Because if people lose hope, okay, if they don't have goals, if they're not aiming towards something, then they're just going to continue to drown out what's stressing them and go party, go out to eat, go to drink. Because reality is tough right now. So I would like to say to the people that are on the sidelines, that are locked out right now, as long as you have hope, you have the ability to become a winner. And the reality is you actually may have dodged a bullet by being forced to the sideline. So you actually may want to be thankful. However, I will tell you guys what I normally tell people as far as an action plan. Now, after hope, number two thing is, as far as credit, is people have to stop the bad stuff from happening. Meaning, you have to pay your bills. You can't not pay your utility bills, have them go into collection. You have to stop as best as you can, the best of your ability, to stop the bad stuff from happening. Now, once you stop the bad stuff from happening, something good you can do is further establish your credit. Often good ways to do that is to get a co-authorized card from a family member or someone along those lines, as long as they're okay with that, and to also get a secured credit card. A lot of times if you have bad credit or challenged credit, the only way to reestablish your credit is to get a secured credit card. Now that's the second thing. Now the third thing is saving as much money as possible. And people that are priced out on the sidelines are probably saying, Travis, I can barely afford to live right now. I can't save any money. When the reality is, a lot of us that say that, and a lot of us that think that, we don't understand how much money we're actually wasting. So a good way to save money when you don't think you can is to thoroughly go through all of your expenses, literally, line by line, and see what you can do to combat your overhead. Now, another thing you're gonna wanna do if you're priced out on the sideline is you're going to want to increase your purchasing power by making more money. Things like commission, overtime, and bonus can go a long way when it comes to qualifying for a mortgage. Now, the rule is you need a 2-year history of each of those things in order to get qualified. But those are really the steps right there. And you should hold that pattern for as long as possible. And one thing that you shouldn't be doing is worrying about the housing market because you're priced out. You have the advantage of being forced to wait for Jerome Powell to finish his job. And another thing, when we do go into recession, remember guys, depending on how bad it is, depending on the black swan, job loss usually spirals out of control. And that's one really big thing I remember about 08 and 09 is the fact that I couldn't even get a job at Walmart. I tried to get a job at Walmart. Just such a bad time. Now let me talk about the people on the sideline like myself. People on the sideline that choose to be on the sideline. And what I mean by that is like for me example, I'm pre-qualified. I can go buy a house right now. I essentially have no consumer debt. I have at least 6 months of my expenses saved. Depending on the house, 25% of my income only would be going to pay off my mortgage. And having said all of those things, I still don't care. I'm still not buying a house. And again, I'm saying the reason why predominantly, I understand interest rates are high, but I'm looking at the price. Yes, interest rates do matter, but in my opinion, the price matters a heck of a lot more. So the emotions that people like us are going through is, well, the first thing is I'm frustrated and I'm annoyed with how many people, well, in my own local market, how many people are migrating into Houston. It's really, really frustrating because, you know, it's frustrating because as someone that lives here, and I have been living here for 11 years, I'm waiting for the housing market to reset. I'm waiting for the balance. I'm waiting for fundamentals. But when I see, you know, people continuously migrating into Houston from places like California, and I know I can't talk because I'm from California, and places like New York, and they just buy houses without even negotiating, it is really frustrating because it really ruins stuff for the people like me that are on the sidelines making sacrifices. I understand why they're doing it. If they're moving from SoCal, maybe they lived in a $1 million house, they come here, that same house is worth $350,000. So it's not a big deal to them, but it is very frustrating. And another thing that's frustrating being on the sidelines, being well qualified, is the amount of bullying that I see on social media. The amount of bullying is completely out of control. And the shocking thing about this, guys, is most of the bullying comes from realtors. And think about that for a second. Some of these people make more money than doctors, yet they act like an 8th grader on social media. They say crazy things like we're losing money, we're losing out on opportunities. There's literally a huge part of society that is shaming us for being cautious. That is an absolutely backwards concept. In my opinion, people should be patting us on the back and say, good job. Thank you for waiting out the housing market. Thank you for helping to reset it. Thank you for waiting for the rest of us. They should be patting us on the back for the discipline, for the sacrifice. Pretty much no one wants to rent, right? I don't necessarily want to rent. I just know that if I buy right now, it's gonna cost roughly $60,000 out of my pocket, and my housing payment goes up over $1,000 a month. So I'm asking myself, well, do I want an overpriced house that I don't really love that's gonna cost me $60,000 out of my pocket and I'm gonna pay an extra $1,000 a month? Of course I don't. There's no way. I don't, but I am still frustrated. I wish we didn't have to wait this long. I understand why we have to wait this long. The whole market's a cycle. And it is what it is. It's slow moving. I thought it was going to happen a lot faster because the equity run-up was a lot greater and the unaffordability was just as bad. But just because the timeline of events didn't go down exactly the way that I thought it would, doesn't mean the housing market isn't suffering. It doesn't mean the housing market's not going to crash. It just means that it's not going to crash on my time. That's all that means. And I want to tell you guys, if you are on the sidelines, I honestly think years from now, when we look back at this situation, everyone's going to look back, roll their eyes and say, what were people thinking? Why did people rush in to buy a home they knew was overpriced, they knew they didn't like, and they still bought it? Why did they do that? I'm not just saying that because I want the housing market to crash. I'm saying that because of certain specific fundamentals that are just not here in our housing market. And when fundamentals aren't there, generally, things don't sustain for very long. And think about what the Federal Reserve is doing. For the first time since the Great Repression, the M2 money supply is going down at the same time the Federal Reserve is doing quantitative tightening and raising interest rates. Not to mention the inverted yield curve. So there's just so much historical precedent to wait and to be cautious right now. It's overwhelming. But I think, again, I think the sad part about society, I'm not saying it's from you guys, I really think consumers, I've seen this in my own career, and it is very sad, but I really think consumers are going to be drawn to people that say what they want to hear. And some consumers right now that have an overwhelming fear of missing out, I'm telling you guys, some of those people are just going to listen to people that say, you better buy now. If you don't buy now, home values are just going to go up. You guys, we have historical precedences now. We have data. And despite what Dave Ramsey says, essentially that home values on a nationwide average only went down one time in 2008, there have been multiple times that home values have gone down, including the Great Depression. In the Great Depression, home values dropped on average, from the data that I've reviewed, 57%. Home values will go down. And when that happens and you're trapped in your house upside down, it could be a problem. I guess this is where I want to conclude, you guys. We are all, every single one of us, so much more important. We are so much more valuable than jumping into the fear of missing out pool and purchasing a home that we can't even afford. Something that I used to do to get myself out of the depression and anxiety is help other people that were worse off than me. My GoPro again and shut it down. I'm trying the best I can to get out here as early as possible so I can beat the heat. You guys see I'm already sweating. I wanted to just get away from the trolling, get away from all the hate, get away from all the charts, and really just tell you, you guys remember this, absolutely nobody should be pressured into purchasing the largest transaction of our lives. And other than that, guys, I absolutely wish each and every one of you the best of luck moving forward. And if you are out there investing in real estate, I do wish you luck, and I hope you win.